Nothing compares to your embrace. The light of the world, forever reign. I'm running to your arms. I'm running to your arms. The riches of your love will always be enough. Nothing compares to your embrace. The light of the world, forever reign. My heart will sing no other name. Jesus, Jesus. My heart will sing no other name. Jesus, Jesus. My heart will sing no other name. Jesus, Jesus. My heart will sing no other name. Jesus, Jesus. And oh, I'm running to your arms. I'm running to your arms. The riches of your love will always be enough. Nothing compares to your embrace. The light of the world, forever reign. I'm running to your arms. I'm running to your arms. The riches of your love will always be enough. Nothing compares to your embrace. Light of the world, forever reign. Sing this with me. My heart will sing no other name. Jesus, Jesus. My heart will sing no other name. Jesus, Jesus.
Well, good morning, Montreat. Good morning, Montreat. It's great to be with you. As you know, we do these interviews along the way. I do 1 or 2 or 3 every semester. You've got a really special treat with Dr. Jeff Heck this morning. Let me give an introduction of Jeff Heck and add a few personal comments after. Dr. Heck started as the CEO of MAHEC, the Mountain Area Health Education Center, in 2012, which is here in Asheville. MAHEC's the second largest healthcare provider in Western North Carolina, is that correct, after Mission Health? Would that be true?
No, because there are a couple hospitals that are larger.
Got it. So, but you're the principal education training center for physicians in residency programs, is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. So Dr. Heck has served as the CEO since 2012 of MAHEC, one of 9 AHEC centers, area health education centers across the state of North Carolina. MAHEC operates residency programs in family medicine, OBGYN, general surgery, general dentistry, psychiatry, pharmacy, has fellowship programs in hospice and palliative medicine, as well as primary care and sports medicine. Also provides professional development for healthcare professionals and health careers and workforce diversity programs for students across this region. Dr. Heck is a professor of family medicine with UNC Chapel Hill and associate dean for the Asheville campus of the UNC School of Medicine, which he founded in 2008. He attended Vanderbilt University, Medical College of Ohio, and a family practice residency program at St. Elizabeth's Medical Center in Dayton, Ohio. In 1995, Dr. Heck served as a consultant to the World Health Organization in Geneva, Switzerland. He was on the faculty of the University of Cincinnati School of Medicine for 20 years, serving as director of its family medicine residency program and professor of family medicine. He has practiced in rural Ohio as well as Kenya, East Africa. He continues to see patients as a CEO, and he'll talk a little bit about that, which I think is really special. Global health is a particular interest to Dr. Heck. He founded a nonprofit organization called Shoulder to Shoulder in 1990 to provide much-needed healthcare services in poor rural Honduran communities, and served as its executive director for more than 20 years. He'll talk about that as well as we get into serving the poor. It is staffed by volunteers from academic partners in the United States. 11 clinics are currently in operation, serving a population of over 70,000 Hondurans. Dr. Heck and his wife, Kathy, who are dear friends of ours, have 5 children and 13 grandchildren. Jeff is also a member of our board of trustees here at the college, and I consider Jeff a confidant, a good friend, and really in alignment with what we're doing this semester and how Rachel's leading us, a very wise man. You know, wisdom is very hard to come by. All it takes is intent and time and experience, but it takes intent and time and experience. Aristotle famously said that the young aren't qualified to be politicians back in the day when he wrote the Politics and the Nicomachean Ethics, because the young aren't wise. You have to go through life to gain wisdom, and there's certainly some truth there. It doesn't mean we can't be wise in our 20s and 30s, but we accumulate wisdom over time. And so I love that we're on this intentional path and that you're kind of really getting unpacked for you this idea of wisdom as we talk. So what I'm going to do, as I usually do, is kind of walk through our guest's story. And so I'm just going to ask a bunch of questions, and as usual, we'll invite you and your questions into the conversation probably close to the bottom of the hour, maybe a little bit after that. So please welcome Dr. Jeff Heck. So I was born in Cincinnati, Ohio. Dr. Heck was born in Middletown, Ohio, which is kind of on the outskirts of Cincinnati. Describe your home and the environment you grew up in.
So thank you, and welcome, Montreat. Glad to be with the students. One of my favorite things to do is actually just talk with young people, medical students, have a lot of time with them. I grew up in a small town in Middletown, Ohio, to a single mom, alcoholic father. I started my first job when I was 12. I don't think I'll know how to retire because I've been working so long. And in those days, I had some amazing friends that actually were sort of my family. And we lived in subsidized housing. It was challenging because my friends didn't live there, and I saw the contrast in a mighty way.
So your father was not in your life beginning at what age?
Beginning about age 10, and then he died when I was 18. But he was out of the picture most of the time.
So let's get to your high school years. You were pretty troubled that your father was not in your life during your high school years, during your life. How did you deal with that?
So it was very difficult in many ways, but on the other hand, I did have the good sense at that time to actually get advice. And through the years, I've thought about this. The church I went to had 2 pastors. One was young. He was the guy that was leading all the Vietnam protests. That shows how old I am. But he was leading all the Vietnam protests, and I liked him. I liked to be around him. He was fun, interesting, challenging. And then there was an older gentleman who was not involved in any of that. And I decided I was going to get my advice from the older gentleman. And I went to his office. I had to schedule an appointment. It was hard to do that, actually, in those days. And I went to his office, and he sat behind a great big desk in all of his robes, and I sat in a smaller chair on the other side. And I have to admit, he was an imposing figure, but I knew he was wise. And I asked him, I said, why is my father still drinking? Why is this happening? What can I do to stop that? And he looked at me and he said, you cannot stop him. You can pray, but he may always drink. And your challenge is not to let the seed of bitterness crawl into your heart, because you'll become cynical and you will struggle the rest of your life. And that was it, 5 minutes, and I left. But I thought about that over and over again, and I took his advice to heart. I have 2 siblings. Both of them have struggled and continue to struggle. But there was something in me at that time that really changed how I thought about what my next task was. And I decided that what I really wanted to do is break the cycle. And I have to admit, I was unusual as a teenager. What I really aspired towards, not to be a physician or academic physician, what I aspired to be mostly was a husband and a father. And I thought, I'm gonna be the best at what they're of those 2. And I actually studied fathers. That was the thing I did. One father was a whole lot of fun. I liked his joy and happiness. There was another one who was steady, serious, always attentive. There was another one who liked adventure and took us on these wild adventures out in the wilderness. And the accumulation of all of them is what I really hoped and desired to do. So, just to fast forward, I was on the lookout. I wanted a mate. I wanted somebody who could live that kind of life with me, and I could raise children. I've been married now 43 years. I met my wife outside organic chemistry class. This wasn't in the original story that I told Dr. Maurer, but I thought probably there was something wrong with me because I couldn't meet the right person. But somehow or another, she just seemed right, and I said, let's go. This is for you men, by the way. I said, I'd like to take you out. I'd like to go out. She said, well, I can't. I have a date. And I said, well, break it. I want to go out with you. And so she said, okay, after my persistence and nagging. And on the way to where we were going to go, which was not very fancy, by the way, it was a pool hall. We played pool. And on the way, I said, what are you doing tomorrow night? And she said, well, I actually have a date. I said, well, break that one too. And she said, well, this will be 2 in a row. I said, break them all. I said, I want to go out with you. I want to get to know you better. So I think either my wife was really impressed or I just wore her down. I think now she'd probably say I wore her down. But we've had an amazing life. We've had an amazing life together. Even just this morning, we had our hour of our personal study time together. And I still have to tear myself away from her because I enjoy her company so well. So God gave me a wonderful thing when he put that desire in my heart when I was young.
So you've talked about this desire to be a great husband. You also had, as a takeaway from your really difficult experience with your father, this really deep desire to be a great father. You also had identified some real ambition along the way. Talk about the drive and the ambition. Talk about the desire to be a great father and kind of what that was, how that kind of bore out in your life, and how you avoided the bitterness that pastor was encouraging you to avoid.
So I would say that in college, I didn't have a very good high school education, so I had to work hard. And in college, after meeting Kathy, which was freshman year, I decided that my next task was I did not want to be poor. I was afraid of poverty. I had seen it up front. I'd seen my mother cry over bills. You know, she would open a letter and there would be a bill and she would cry. And I just thought, I just don't want this. I don't want this. So I have to admit, shamelessly, that I was motivated by that. And I thought, I didn't know a lot about jobs, but I knew the doctors in my town had big houses. So I thought, well, you know, maybe that's what I should do. But I learned to love the sciences. And the sciences taught me to think rationally and algorithmically. And I love the study of sciences. And I have to admit, I loved medical school. I was curious and interested. Things fascinated me. They still do. I haven't been able to stop reading about coronavirus all week. But I still find myself really interested in it. And I feel so fortunate that the Lord gave me a job that I can't imagine not doing. So that was that point. Avoiding the bitterness, I feel like, you know, one of the things, I believe it's an effort. You have to cultivate in your thinking that all people are created in the image of God. And Lewis said that you would either be tempted to bow down and worship them after eternity, or you would be hideously afraid of what they have become through eternity. And so in my mind, the default is assuming the best of people, assume that they are made in God's image. I always find one of my favorite things to do is still to think that there's somebody that I don't particularly have any fondness for, and discover that they have something really interesting in them, something that's different and fascinating, and I find myself encouraged by getting to know them. So I think that's a cultivated habit.
So you ended up at Vanderbilt for college. What led you to Vanderbilt, and what led you to consider medicine beyond what you've talked about already?
So at Vanderbilt, I mean, in medical school, a really important thing happened to me. I was, my anatomy partner, Ron Jones, he just randomly, we were assigned to there were 4 people per cadaver. Ron was my partner, and Ron was a strong believer. And we would, as we dissected the human body, we would talk about the Lord. And he would say things to me that I found outrageous about the amount of dedication that it took to be a believer. It was far more than I had grown up thinking. In fact, he opened the door for me and thinking, the Lord is a lot bigger than I ever thought he was. And so over dissection and afterwards, I went home and I told my wife, I said, you know, I said, Kathy, this guy has something to tell us that we need to know. And together, we started having dinners with him, and before too long, we were totally committed in our faith, and also began to see medicine not just as a job, but as a way to serve others. And I had a fabulous experience in medical school. I was really fortunate to have that the Lord gave me an amazing anatomy partner.
Your first job after medical school was in a rural setting, and then you went to Kenya. Tell us about the impact of those 2 experiences.
Both of those experiences gave me I think number one was a really strong understanding of the sacredness of being a physician. People tell you things that they don't tell anybody else, and I have many times people have said to me, I've not told anybody else in the world this, but. And I also found in Kenya a fairly profound realization of how pervasive and how horrible world poverty is. I thought I was poor. I was not poor. Poverty existed in places like rural Tanzania and Kenya and Somalia and the other places that we traveled to.
And then you went to the University of Cincinnati, joined the faculty at the School of Medicine there, and that's where the seeds that had been planted before began to sprout, and you began to serve the poor in a whole new way. Tell us about that, and give us a couple of examples of what you experienced.
So it seemed to me one of the ways to really understand poverty and actually understand yourself is actually to make yourself vulnerable in the midst of poor people. And I wanted my medical students and residents to experience that same thing. So as an academic physician and focusing on global health, I was able to travel to Honduras 3 or 4 times a year, several weeks at a time, and bringing groups of medical students and residents. And there my teaching was part tropical medicine and healthcare, but there was a lot about life that began to experience. And a couple of things that would be really helpful to illustrate that is one of the villages we used to visit was a place called San Francisco de Magdalena in the area where is called the poverty corridor of Honduras. And I remember going up with one of the other physicians to see a child that they had asked me to see, and it was there were actually 2 children. Both had some genetic problem and were severely handicapped. And the mother and the father had just cared for them beautifully. They were clean, they were dry, but they lived in a house with a dirt floor and mud walls, and they were very poor. And as I saw them care for them, I thought, these are the most remarkable people in the world. And this woman, Daisy, she will have a mansion in heaven somewhere. And I could just see her standing in the throne of God, standing in front of her mansion and welcoming all comers into her home. And she was extraordinarily gracious. And as we examined those children, I looked around the house to see what other things could maybe give me some idea about how those children are being cared for. I did notice it was clean. I did notice there was some food stored, but I also noticed that above the heads of those children were their coffins. The father had built their coffins with the clear realization that those children would not live. In fact, they even had another healthy child, and there was a coffin above his bed as well. And I thought to myself, this is something I would never dream of for my own children. And I became profoundly aware of how many blessings I have. And then shining the light on my own sense that I had something that I had to struggle with when I was a child, there was no comparison. And one other story would be helpful to illustrate this is that we would typically see many, many hundreds of patients in a short period of time. And on one particular day, there was a large group of people. Each person had to put on a card the name and the age of the child or a person they wanted us to see. So the very last person came in with a nursing infant in her arm and a 2-year-old child in her hand. And she was the last patient, and I'm the one who saw them. So we were in the same place we were sleeping. So the mother and her children walked in. They snaked their way through backpacks and in those days, other things like iPods and you know, all the technology that people have, and peanut butter sandwiches and little packages of nuts and chips and, you know, stuff to drink. And she snaked her way through that, and as most poor people are, she was humble, her head was down, and I said, how can I help you? And she handed me her card, and in the card it had the name and age of her nursing infant. And she said, I just want to know that my baby's healthy. And so I took a lot of time, examined that patient really carefully. The child was healthy, 6-month-old, nursing. And then she turned to walk away after I had reassured her, and I said, wait a minute, do you not want me to see the 2-year-old? She said, I don't think he's going to live. And I said, well, let me look. And I examined this kid, and the child, instead of having the black, beautiful hair of Latino child had red, thin, wispy hair. Instead of having smooth, healthy skin, the skin was marred by many, many marks from scabies. The child had edema and a swollen belly, edema swelling legs and swelling eyes, and had a listless look about him. And of course, the child had severe malnutrition, protein energy malnutrition, severe protein energy malnutrition. And the skin breakdown was because he had lost his defenses and his belly was full of worms. And I said, "Do you not have enough to eat?" And she says, "I don't have enough to eat." And she turned to walk away. And I thought to myself, if that was me, and I walked in a room of people that had all this stuff, bags of chips and nuts and all this stuff and money and all that stuff, I would have thrown myself down at the knees of those people and begged for mercy and begged for someone to help me save the life of my child by giving them something to eat. But the lesson there, unfortunately, is really, really poor people cannot advocate for themselves. It takes you. They're not like you. They're not like me. I know how to beg. I know how to ask for things. If it's for my children, I would humble myself to any degree. But unfortunately, very poor people, they need advocates. They need people who will work on their behalf, who will advocate for them. And that's all over the world. So one of the things that I found very compelling is that it is worth our effort. It's worth being tired. It's worth sleeping on the concrete floor. It's worth eating food that you don't like. It's worth leaving friends and family for such things. It's worth not having the biggest house and not taking the biggest vacation. So a really important lesson.
Briefly describe kind of how your heart got shaped to care for and love the poor. Was it you cared for and loved the poor before you went and experienced these things? And what role did experiencing these things have in shaping your heart and deepening your love and care for the poor? And how your faith impacts that?
So I have to admit, I think human love is often imperfect, and the motivations are often not right. But I still, even today, physicians particularly see some really horrible stuff. We see a lot of pain and suffering, a lot of poverty. I have over the years realized that I must be humble before the Lord in terms of asking Him to give me His heart for people. And I think this is another learned habit. When I go into a room and I know that there's somebody who's really profoundly ill or sick, I pray for the keys to their answer, to keys to wisdom to be able to help them. And I think it's a combination of both actually really working and cultivating a heart for it, but it's also praying that the Lord will give me that.
I'm mindful of our time. Feel free to text your questions, and I got a couple, so we're going to kind of pick up the pace here. Beginning in 1990, you dedicated 20 years of your life to serve the poor in Honduras. Tell us briefly about that.
Well, I think in that period of time, I learned a lot. I also think it prepared me well for serving Western North Carolina. We have a lot of poverty in Western North Carolina. We have communities where 25% of the population is uninsured. Now we have people who are either poor or older or disabled. That's Medicare or Medicaid. We have about 75% of our population in Western North Carolina that only have government health insurance. That they have it because they're poor, blind, aged, or disabled. And so that the work has prepared me well for what I do now. And my colleagues at work, we talk about mission every day. Every day we talk about what is our mission? What are we supposed to be doing? How can we help the people in this region? We also have to talk about things like budget, but it's only because it supports the mission.
We've talked a lot about the poor. We also want to hear a little bit about your view of work. So Proverbs has a lot to say about work and work ethic, and so describe your view of work.
So in my mind, work is a gift. It's something that the Lord gives us. I actually like working. It's not to say that I'm not tired at times. I do not conflate being tired with being burned out. Burnout is when you feel like your effort is fruitless and you don't make a difference. It's the person who's chopping rocks all day long to make gravel. That's not my work. I would hope and pray that's not your work either. But I find work as a place that I can engage my talents and skills. It's an opportunity for me actually to witness the glory of God, and it's rarely talking about it. Occasionally it is. I have a colleague who is a close colleague. I've been praying for him for 12 years. He's asked me to pray for him. He says, I have knowledge of Scripture, and he had such knowledge that he actually studied Hebrew so that he could better understand Scripture. But he said, I don't have faith. So I prayed for him for 12 years. So this summer he came to know the Lord. He doesn't call it that because he's not actually he doesn't learned all the lingo. So what he says to me is, now that I wear the mantle of Christ, we frequently pray together over challenging issues. I find work is a place where ministry opportunities are full. It's actually where God reveals himself almost every day.
So a couple of questions from our students. One is, are you worried about the coronavirus?
Not really. You're more likely here in Western North Carolina to get St. Louis encephalitis, which you don't even know about, because it's rare, or hantavirus because it's rare. Still, the actual prevalence of it here is minimal. But it's like many other diseases. The coronavirus is a similar virus to the SARS virus and another virus called MERS, which is Middle Eastern respiratory disease. And those are viruses. Viruses are hard to cure. You can only really develop a vaccine. So I feel for the people in China. I think it could be a significant epidemic, and it could spread throughout the world too. But I think that we'll have good minds working on the virus. What's interesting is, you shouldn't have asked that question. I love this kind of stuff. Within 2 weeks of the first case being uncovered, a Chinese researcher actually decoded the entire genome sequence of the virus, something unheard of in previous years. And so when you have the whole gene sequence of a virus, you can actually develop a vaccine much easier.
There's a question about your relationship with Kathy. What do you do in your relationship that has made it so happy, healthy, and long-lived?
We talk, share life together, raise children together. I would say that the other thing is, we have actually one of our children ask us, tell us the secrets to a happy marriage. So we spent 2 weeks, 3 or 4 years ago, and we just every day we say, okay, let's talk about all the things that are required for a good marriage and what we've learned through the years. And so we said we were going to write 10 things, they were 16 things, and we gave them to our children, and they're actually still using them. And they're pretty simple things, like when you walk in the door, we always greet each other. We always look each other in the eye, tell each other hello, ask each other how things are, how our day was. And we don't start saying, hey, could you take the garbage out? Or could you, why are the dishes in the sink? We don't do that. We've worked hard not to do that. That's one thing. But there are actually 15 things. Maybe you can have me back. I'll give you the 16 things.
How can college students serve those in deep poverty? Honduras is far away. What can we do?
Well, I would say there are many different forms of poverty. Old people are in poverty. Old people have lost a lot of the vibrancy they had when they were younger, and they need someone to talk to them. I would say that we have a lot of poverty. We have a lot of poverty in Western North Carolina. And I would say, there are many organizations that you can volunteer for as well. You can volunteer in. I would also say that at your stage in life, I would try to get acquainted with it. And what I mean by that is that you probably can't help a lot yet. You need skills to be really helpful. I would say not completely, but you do. But the more skills you have, the more helpful you are. And so I would expose yourself to mission experiences or opportunities to actually just be with people who are poor and talk to them and ask them questions and be part of their life. And before too long, they will be teaching you something. I'm still learning from my patients. My patients are teaching me all the time, but at the same time, I'm trying to give back.
I think this is probably the last question, depending on, we're almost out of time here. So how effective do you feel the Affordable Care Act has been in supporting people who are less fortunate?
Well, we're getting into politics here now.
Our time is up.
So I know very few physicians who do the kind of work that I do for marginalized people that don't believe we need, at a minimum, a single payer. Healthcare should be a fundamental right that everybody has. It is very expensive. At my age now, for me to go out and buy health insurance, it would cost about somewhere close to $1,500 to $2,000 a month. And most people don't have that kind of disposable income. My daughter recently had an appendectomy. It used to cost $2,000 to have your appendix taken out. Her bill was $42,000. This is not affordable anymore, and yet it is an important need for everyone to have. So the Affordable Care Act, in my mind, did not go far enough. We actually need to have everyone covered by health insurance. And, in the United States, 40% of all the foreclosures in the United States are due to medical bills. People can't pay their medical bills, and so they lose their house. In Germany, it's 0, and most other countries in Europe. So I think we need that. Our population needs that.
I'm going to sneak in one more question, and then we need to land the plane here. We could go on for a long time. You're very, very interesting at so many levels. What advice would you have for our students generally, and what advice would you have for those in our health sciences?
Well, for the health sciences, I would say work hard. It matters. In fact, maybe I could just say for everybody. I had a medical student ask me, what are the things I need to do to be successful as a medical student? And I thought about it, and I said, you know what? Actually, I think there are 6 things that everybody needs to be successful at what they do. And they're this. Number 1, work hard. You got to put the effort in. Second, be on time. When you're late, you send a message that your time's more important than somebody else. Number 3 is do what you say you're going to do. So if you make a promise, do it. It's really important for patients. If you don't do what you say you're going to do and you don't follow up or you don't check their lab work, something disastrous could happen. So do what you say you're going to do. 4th one is admit when you're wrong. So everybody makes mistakes, and I don't want to burst your bubble, but even physicians make mistakes, and the important thing is admitting when you're wrong. Don't try to cover up. And the 5th one is dress appropriately. So know your audience. So there are times when you have to dress, times you can dress like you are now, and other times you have to dress more formal. There are times I wear a suit. When I go out into the rural areas, I wear a sweater and no tie. It just depends on your audience. And the last one, and really important, be nice to all people. So even the people that you find that are not like you, or you have some underlying bias about them in some way. But be nice to all people, regardless of their background, their politics, their religion, their race. Be nice to all people. That's called civility. So those are the 6 things.
Great way to wrap up the morning. Please join me in thanking Jeff Heck.